Hello, everybody. My name is Mameyaa. My co-host is Esther, and today we're going to be leading you through colorism. If Esther will go on to the next slide, I'll just talk a bit about what today's session is going to entail. So today's session, like I said, we're going to be talking about colorism. We're going to be discussing what it is, who is it for, who should care, and its impact on individuals and communities. Why is it important? The majority of us are black. I'm just assuming in our community. So it's a conversation that I think we should be having, a conversation that is important, knowingly or unknowingly, and it's affecting people's lives. What are the learning outcomes for this session? Is to have a dialogue basically acknowledging colorism and to see what new languages we can have regarding this matter, what changes that there can come about from this discussion. And your level of participation is very much needed. The session of this outline is going to be discussion. We're going to have a discussion, even though we have made a presentation. Our focus is to get a conversation started, to get people talking. So we're going to be having a conversation. So we're going to be needing you to unmute yourselves. We're going to need everybody's participation, from Joshua to everybody. So we need everybody's input. So we're going to get it cracking. So I'm going to hand over to Esther to start our first topic of conversation. Over to you, Esther.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mameyaa. So, guys, gonna put a poll now. So as you can see on the screen, the question is, does colorism exist? So even before we get into what is colorism, does colorism exist? So you're going to have right now on your screens, yes or no. You have about 30 seconds to put your answers, and then we can have a discussion. Okay, I think a few more people are waiting for 10 more seconds. One more person, one guest user hasn't done it. We can do one more. If we can get a full house, that would be great. If not, I'm going to publish the results. It's interesting. Mameyaa, the results are coming in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Amen.
So, Mameyaa,
even though I'm sitting down, I would have stood up and then fell off the ground to the ground if somebody had said no, it doesn't exist. So thank you.
So apart from one person that did not contribute in terms of that, we could presume that that person might have said yes. We have a full house of yes. Colorism exists. Does anybody want to share their reasons why they think colorism exists? Yes, guest user, please.
Yes, it's Charles. In Jamaica, it's apparent with colorism, and I've got one of my oldest sister, and my mum's side of family are really, really dark skinned, but she was the only brown one. I don't know, my mum must have. She's not the same. We're not the same dad, you know. And then she was the only brown skin cousin up in where my mum's village, and she was favored, and she was spoiled by my grandmother because she was brown skin, and you know, even up to now when I go and see my sister, because as I said, I live in Jamaica, but we always have this big argument about, and I'm saying that you're black, you know, why you know, you make out that you what you're actually saying, that you're better than a black person by saying that you're brown skin. I'm not black, I'm brown skin. And a lot of people, there's a lot of you know, in Jamaica, when they look at a brown skin girl, and I said that they're pressing themselves, is that, oh, look at that girl with the nice, pretty brown skin, and because she got nice, pretty hair. And I said, but you're black and you've got nice skin and you've got nice hair. So it's still, and years ago in Jamaica, you should go and you should see like all the frontline workers in the banks and the hotels and the, you know, insurance companies at the front desks, all of them was brown skin, you know, but now, thank God, it's changed and you go and see black people. But it's still, you know, there's still bleaching in Jamaica, and it still exists, unfortunately. So yes, I believe that it's prevalent.
Thank you so much. And Alina, I don't know if you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was actually. So I was brought up with two brothers, and my brother, who's directly below me, is only 2 years below. He's about the complexion, I would say, of Fred, actually, because my mum is that complexion too. And I remember growing up, and my gran used to be like, "Oh, you're black this, you're dark, you're ugly," and she really made me feel that I wasn't good enough. And actually, what was interesting was as I grew older and I was speaking to my mum, and I was like, "Mum, I don't understand. Like, why did she dislike me so much?" And then she actually said, "It's because your brother was light." She had a thing about light skin, coolie, and all of these other things. So, yeah, sadly, I think it's very prevalent in the Caribbean because people tend to be very image conscious. And that whole thing of, "Oh, you're brown skin girl," it's like you hear that a lot, especially when I've been around light skinned ladies. And I think it's sad, really, because it's a conundrum. You've got this thing where you get a lot of men say, "Oh yeah, I would never date." They've got a thing about racism and how the white people are this and the white people are that, and at the same time, in the same breath, they're like, "Oh, but they would prefer a lighter skinned lady." And I think it's actually a reflection on what they think of themselves, because they don't actually appreciate their color. They don't value themselves.
So I definitely agree that colorism exists. Like we all know that statement, what guys say, you know, "You're pretty for a dark skinned girl," as if a dark skinned girl cannot be pretty. So
I think it's that terminology that we're trying to even tackle, having that language. And I
yeah.
think I must admit, even from hearing somebody say that, I think
Mm-hmm.
the answer to go back is like, well, what do you mean by that? And
Yeah,
that doesn't
exactly.
give a dialogue of understanding. And I think I struggled with this until a couple of years ago, before I came across the colorism whole thing on the line and learning about it and learning a whole different space to just have this, not even an argument, but being asserted in, what you actually did feel or believed was true. Is because when you hear that kind of statement come at you, you just think, well, what does that mean? You're lost
Interesting.
in that
Yeah, sorry.
conversation. You're lost.
Sorry to interject, but in terms of, let me be honest, that's never been direct to myself per se, but obviously being of rich in melanin, I do know that a lot of us girls, come across that sort of statement, but it's not actually been directed at me. But I know that we come across that daily, where it's like, "Oh, okay, like you're pretty for a black girl." It even goes as far as that, "Oh, you're pretty for a black girl." But then if you're going to take it even further, it's like, "Oh, you're pretty for a dark skinned girl," as if shades determine your beauty.
Can I interject is just one thing I was saying. I always say that funny that we and I always say to my sister and all the rest of it with the brown skin thing. I said funny that when a white guy goes for a black girl, he goes for a black girl. And I twice around where I'm living, and I saw two black girls. I'm sure they come from like either Namibia or something like that. And I mean, it was seriously black. And the both of them was going out with white guys. So when a white man goes for a black girl, he doesn't go. You hardly see white men with brown skin girls. They always go for a black person to say, "I want a black woman." I go for a black woman. So they appreciate blacks when they go for black, and we as blacks don't want to appreciate our own black.
Could I just interject on something? Just as and Esther, you might cut, and Mameyaa, you might cover this. I think there's also an element within colorism. I'm going to add another word, which is like featureism. It's this idea that I've noticed that it's not just about color; it's about whether features are closer to Western European structure. So you might find a woman who's very dark, but she's more acceptable because her features, like the construct of her cheeks, her chin, her lips, her nose, play a part within it. So I just think that's something to consider as well.
So it's kind of similar to the question. So those that haven't spoken, it'd be great to hear you. So I'm going to do a poll because as Nadia even mentioned, she knows colorism exists, but it doesn't necessarily affect her in the same way. So this question is slightly different. However you interpret it is fine. But does colorism affect you?
Esther, can I just clarify that? Is it effect or affect? Me as a person individually, or do I think it affects me like at work in the way people perceive me?
Or is it past tense or present tense?
Yes, however you interpret that, because some people would say it doesn't affect them specifically, but maybe it affects people that they know, their family members.
Yeah, so I've answered in that way, that it's not affecting me specifically as in my self-esteem, but it does impact me, I think, at work and when I'm around. Okay, cool.
Gonna publish the polls in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So there's more yes, because Choma said yes, so there'll be 7 yeses, 1 no. Okay, so it'll be interesting to hear the no's.
So can I say a piece? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I chose yes, right, and I'm with Nadia in the sense where it's never directly, and I consider myself to be dark skinned, but it's strange because I've had people that are darker skinned than me refer to me as fair or light skinned. Then I've had people that are maybe like reddish brown refer to me as dark skinned. Like these are like females. And then I've like historically, like I remember in high school and stuff like that, I've had like, I remember, and even guys I've dated, I've had like one guy in high school who was just a friend, and he had a complex with his complexion, this Ghanaian brother. And I remember he was always talking about, oh, my mum's light, and he'd show a picture of his mum. She was very, very fair. And he would say, oh, my sister's your complexion as well. He would say, I'll never date a girl darker than your complexion. He'll be like, your complexion is the like for me, for him, as dark as he would ever go, anything beyond. And then I had like a best friend at high school who was just a teeny bit darker than me. Then he would be like, no, actually, what's her name's, I'm not going to say her name, but what's her name's complexion? That's the darkest I would go. And then we would have like, I remember there was like 1 or 2 people in our year whose skin was amazing. It was so melanated, shining, no flaws, no pimple, just beautiful. And when I look back at their skin, I remember like people would sometimes, just out of banter and stuff, because like it was, you know, to high school sometimes it would be rough, like the way people would go back and forth with each other, but they would always use the term blick, like the term blick meaning you're blacker than black, you're so black that you're blick, like you're charcoal. But their skin was so gorgeous, like honestly. And so I've seen colorism, and why I say that it affects me, because I've always said, like I've said to Esther before, I'm not fair, I'm not light skinned, because if I was in a room with light skinned people, I'll be dark skinned, so I'll be the darkest person in the room. But where it does affect me is when I think of like my younger cousins, or I think of, like Fred was talking about, featureism. I bring featureism into colorism as well, because they're all forms of racism. It's like as close as you are to the Eurocentric way of looking, the more acceptable you are. So you could be dark skinned with, even dark skin without European features, but you have coolie hair. So then people are like, oh, she's beautiful because she's got coolie hair. Her hair looks like Indian hair or European hair, kind of thing. So it's like, it does affect me as a woman who wants to have children and wants to have, if I have daughters, they're going to grow up in a world, or if I have sons, I'm like, oh, I don't want to impact my sons and make them say, oh, you know, only bring home, you know, a black woman, but I don't want them to be thingied by the media to only believe that they can only bring home maybe a mixed or exotic looking woman, or, you know, because of like colorism. And like I've seen it with like close friends. I've seen also even it with like my brother. He's that's a whole other thing, and I do think it's to do with colorism, because he's only ever dated white women, and when I remember him saying to me, if he was to date black, he would probably go with like a light-skinned black woman. So it's just, it affects me because I see the effect, and I'm like, I'm a woman, I want to have children one day. What kind of a world am I going to bring them into?
I was just simply going to say the reason everybody would be affected by colorism is because color is one of the features, and people are aesthetic. People have eyes, you know. So it's kind of like the question, I'm hearing it almost like saying, are you impacted by the way you look, you know? And as we move in this world, whether it's the way you look or the way you dress, is going to impact how you're perceived or desired, etc., etc. So it's kind of like, I'm even wondering, why is skin the main thing when there's so many other features that are playing a part? And also I wrote the question, why are we calling it European features when, yes, some people might like European hair, but they like black lips, or they might like black, physique.
Bloomy, colorism specifically exists because there's a certain group of people, okay, that are disliked because of their features, because of the color of their skin within our own community.
Next question. Is there such a thing as dark skin privilege? I'm going to just publish the votes now. So it's 50% yes, 50% no. I'm interested in the yes. Mami, what are you interested in?
I'm definitely interested in the yes, because I was part of the yes party.
Were you
And if
part
I
of
may,
the
I
no?
put yes, there is dark skin privilege only on the gender side to the males. In the media, there is a dark skin privilege for men in the media. They can do no wrong. Anything that happens that is of praise and of worship, like say a person like Idris Elba, anybody who's melanated with deep skin complexions in Hollywood is praised at the moment, and I think it has always been the case. Whereas there is no dark skin privilege when it comes to the struggles. You see dark faces in those places, especially for women. You see dark spaces attached to struggle. Struggle, be it struggle love, be it struggle friendship, be it struggle in the home, single parent, mother, everything that is to do with struggle, you will see dark skin black women faces attached to that. But anything to do with privilege, the dark skinned men, they get it all. That is just my point of view. Okay, over to you guys.
Okay, Cadman, let's go on.
There is also dark skin privilege when it comes to fitness, especially for those who are into the gym aspects of their career. Provided you're dark, there is this privilege you get. And I don't want to go too deep, but I have weakness where someone who's not, I don't want to say white anyway, but fine. Okay, let me just use the word white. Will say, provided you're dark, you're going to build more muscle better and quicker. So in all terms of the physical aspect, yes, there is.
Is that for males or females?
Males.
Okay. Yeah, I think, ma'am, what you said is correct. I think however it changed, I think there was a sense whenever black men back in the 30s, well, in the 1900s onwards, black men were seen as rapists, they were seen as this, but I don't know when there was a switch, but it became a switch. You're talking about in media that black men become the ideal. Black women were always the slaves, the house thing, and unfortunately has kind of stayed and or is the sexual object. But with men, it has changed. And I always tell a lot of black men that do get gassed that unfortunately that's the only area you're gassed in, because in other areas black men are at the bottom. But when it comes to sexual prowess, and as Cadmus has said it, fitness, then yes, black men are seen as that. So I would say to a degree on the reverse, because you're going to have some black men that say, but black men were still seen as gangsters and seen as this. So there's nuances in that. But I think in terms of perception of beauty, black men do have a darker skin privilege when it comes to the media.
Esther, could I just come in on that? Because I think that one of the things that's very interesting, and I think this covers both black men and black women, is that often the perception of black men and women are very much attributed to the physicality of things. I don't see in recent Western history much in terms of the acknowledgement of intellectualism in black men and women. I often see that when you look at our educational system, it's very much geared towards the lighter skinned in terms of intelligence. But when you move towards the physiology, the physical, the looks, and then there's the whole question around black men and women. I would also say in the past, the reason why I said yes in terms of privilege is also because in the past, within particular cultures, whether that's within the African continent, then actually in other societies, the darker you were, actually, the better you were. And that used to work in other societies and other tribes. So that was my reason why I said yes.
Isn't it so like for every skin tone, typically there'll be pros and cons in terms of there's going to be those who like it, and there's always going to be context as well, right? So if like even the whole idea of being exotic, you're not exotic if you're in Nigeria, for example, but then if you're in some other country, then it becomes exotic. Just like standard white English skin is not exotic, but in another context, it can be exotic. Same thing applies to fruits. Some fruits people call exotic. If you're in a country where that fruit is there all the time, it's not really exotic to you. So for me, I find it's a very broad question in that, yeah, of course, there'll be privileges, right? Depending on your context or where you are and how you are, etc. And then just like there'll be probably negative aspects as well. And that applies to everybody.
Does colorism affect male or female the same way? Okay, I'm just going to publish the results. So potentially could be the same. So majority of people said no. Interesting. I guess it leans to what we were saying. So we'll move on to the last question. Is there such a thing as light skin privilege? And then I am going to publish the results. So yes, there is such a thing as light skin privilege. One or two people want to share something, and then we can continue on.
So I did want to jump into this. If you haven't seen it at all, I think I recently just went through the whole series on O.J. Simpson on the BBC. Really, really interesting, because it was discussing the idea of how much was there racial implications to the decisions around his being freed from the crime that he may or may not have committed. But I think the reason why I've said yes to this is because I think that as you move towards Western European culture, then naturally with that culture, that history and that culture, it's going to lean itself in all of what it does in terms of its industry towards its people. So for me, it makes sense that there is privilege. I would expect in the past, in other cultures, there to be a leaning in a similar direction. And you do find that the caste system in India is a good example, where skin tone does play a part in your ability to move up the social ladder. And we see that happens even now in India. So I think, yes, it does.
Yeah, so alongside what Fred was saying in terms of India, I don't think it even stays there. I think it even travels as far as China. You see how Chinese are very, very, very conscious about tanning. They don't like tanning. They obviously they see wealth as the lighter you are, the more wealthy you are, the better jobs you get, the positions. That goes for the women, even further as the features, that they even try to get plastic surgery for their eyes, so they don't have that sort of, the Chinese type looking eyes. So definitely lighter skin is definitely a privilege in China too. So yeah.
Okay, so interestingly enough, if you did not know, that colorism was coined by Alice Walker, and its definition is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a darker skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Colorism is a global cultural practice. It is in every single country with any type of melanated skin. I don't mean black, I just mean any type of pigment. It is there. You're going to find it in Indonesia. You're going to find it in Borneo. You're going to find it in Australia. You're going to find it in Pakistan. You will find it in South Africa. You will find it in Guinea-Bissau. You will find it in South America. You find it everywhere. I assess a lot of people.
That's the question, Esther. When you say we'll find colorism, are we saying that we will find people that prefer lighter or darker? Or are you saying that colorism specifically is preferring the lighter?
Colorism is defined as prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a darker skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group, simply meaning that in every single country that I've mentioned and those that I haven't mentioned, if you're of darker complexion, you are going to feel the impact of colorism and you're going to be seen as less down in different ways, whether you're a man or you're female. you feel it in different ways. Females probably feel it more just because of beauty standard and all over the world. But as our guest mentioned, Charles talked about in Jamaica in terms of getting certain jobs, it's the same as in Nigeria. Nigeria is the biggest consumer of bleach, and I was shocked because I thought it would be Congo, but actually it is Nigeria. And people do it, and if you ask a Nigerian person who bleaches, they're not less Nigerian than you or I, but in their minds they can get a man if they're lighter skinned, and they can get a job if they're lighter skinned. So that's the point of colorism. It's discriminatory and prejudice. It means that it impacts your fabric, your life. It means that if you're getting in a car, for example, someone might say to you, don't get in because you're too dark. That's what it means. It's not just about preference. It's about how you feel in society, how you move. Your liberty to move in society is restricted by virtue you've got a darker and pigmented skin. We would call that overall racism, but we're saying that there are elements within a particular race that then get an extra layer burden. So Black people overall would say that racism exists. However, to the extent we can debate, but a lot of Black people have experienced being told, don't do X because you're Black. But how much more when you're darker skinned, usually by your fellow Black people, don't do this because you're Black, you're darker skin. It's even crazier. Because it's like, we're all Black, different shades. I can't determine the level of melanin in my skin, but because of that, I am seen a certain way and I am judged a certain way. That is what colorism is.
Okay, so if, for example, the English and many kind of Europeans like that tanned look, they like to be tanned and stuff, whereas in other places they might prefer other ways around, etc. So that is not colorism, for example, for the British to like that tanned look, but it's colorism if let's say Nigerians prefer a fairer look.
It's not preference, Palumi. You have in your mind a preference. We're talking about a way of life that is being impeded.
Oh,
we're not talking about preference. Colorism is not a preference thing. It's not a preference for me to be darker skinned or for Jockey to be fair skinned. It's not the preference, the idea of preference, but it's the idea that you're the color of your skin, even in your own community. Okay, another Black person could be the same as me, but if we're going for a job, the hotel manager might say, oh, because this person is light skinned, it will be better for my shop for this person to be in the front of my shop because they are light skinned. Meanwhile, we're all Black.
And that's a different phenomenon about why white people like to tan. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to be Black, but yeah, that's a different phenomenon. And that does touch on into the extraction of Black culture, but not necessarily specifically colorism. So there's different origins of colorism, and one of the things that I think is very, very important, particularly because we're in the UK, is we need to expand our origins of colorism as just the darker skinned slaves in the fields and the lighter skinned slaves in the house, which is true for countries, for America particularly, maybe even Southern America and definitely the Caribbean, where plantations existed. Where plantations didn't exist in Africa, the reason why colorism exists is very different. I'm going to play a video later on that really gives a good origin of colorism and blew my mind, because I've always known that there's a different reason why Nigerians are colorist to Jamaicans, or a different reason why African countries are colorist to Americans, because we've got a different level of history, though there's similarities. Colonialism and the effects of that, though similar, is also different than slavery and the impact we have. And I think it's really important that each your ethnicity, could be race Black, but ethnicity wise, wherever you're from, it's important to understand your narrative, because the reasons why your people are colorism, although similar to my people, could be different, though the effect unfortunately is still the same. So as we know, Black people were treated like cattle, nothing more than animals or beasts. And when even the reality is that mixed race, so they used to call it mulattoes, existed in the 1600s. From the moment that Black people came to America and to the Caribbean, the white masters, particularly the men, obviously would sleep with the women and produce children. So from the big dawn of the transatlantic slave trade, the social hierarchy was produced through race mixing. Who knows if it was purposeful or just because of lust, you know, and other sins developed, and then as a result, human nature is to coin a hierarchy. And yeah, so for America and potentially the Caribbean and even Southern America, colorism kind of comes from that social hierarchy being made because of the mixing of black and white, predominantly via rape. So experiences with discrimination more common for Hispanics and darker skin. In the last couple of years, people are really seeing colorism in Latin America, and you know, Afro-Latinas are becoming a big thing, and even to the ignorance of African American, like what's Afro-Latina? Like I was shocked when Charlemagne and Envy in the Breakfast Club was questioning what's her name? Can't remember her name now. No, not Angela Yee. Was questioning the other black girl from Love and Hip Hop. I can't remember her name. But was questioning a dark-skinned Latino woman, asking her what colorism, what Afro-Latina was. It's simply that Africans went to Southern America, like Africans went to America, and called Afro-Latina. So that's just to show you the level of ignorance there still is, but also the renaissance of understanding people's Africanness, people's blackness in different countries. And people say, actually, Latin America is not just J-Lo, you know, it's not just the Perus. There are lots of dark skin black people in Latin America, so, and men and women. So yeah, I think there's just a renaissance all over the world about colorism, about featureism, about all of it. They've always existed.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of colorism, I'm gonna try and keep it short as possible. I don't want to rant. I think I've witnessed people having, like, arguing from within the community and outside the community about, you have one argument about how, you know, if you're of a darker complexion, that you're entitled to a black woman, or if you're a black woman, you're entitled to a darker skinned man, or a man of African or Caribbean origin. And I feel like the issue of colorism is definitely there, but I think there's some boundaries that are crossed when people ignore attraction. Like, for example, now you could grow up in an all-black community and could be genuinely attracted to a Latino woman, or you could be born in a Latin community or an English community and be genuinely attracted to somebody. You know, obviously, I'm not going to ignore colorism definitely is there. I think when I think of colorism, I think of unhealthy relationships and an unhealthy way of thinking about people. You know, dark-skinned people are beautiful, like whatever complexion you are. People are beautiful based on their character, not just their skin color. Well, their skin color. If you're dark and beautiful, you're beautiful, or if you're handsome. But I think we often miss complexities. Like, people like to simplify things, maybe because they have a sense of entitlement to a certain group of people.
You've very simplified it by just saying if you brought up in a black community and you happen to be attracted to a Latino, it's just attraction. That in itself is a simplification of attraction, because attraction, like anything, is all constructed by what you see and what you're told to find attractive. The same way we are complaining about the fact that our young children are being over-sexualized and certain themes are being, that we don't agree with biblically, are becoming normalized. When you've got a young child brought up in a Christian home and asks you a question, oh, why can't two men be together? You'd be looking at them, how? It's because of the constant normalization in media. So attraction is not absent of all of these things that make you attracted to someone. It's not as simple as, oh, they're just attracted to that person because, oh, that person be light skinned, it's attracted to that person. No, there's
No,
a
definitely.
that's why I would disagree on the fact that of what you're, because the point you're trying to make is that if a black person, because I'm surprised, but I do know black women do say that, but if a darker skinned black woman assumes that another darker skinned black woman should find her attractive, I think that's a normal assumption. Any other culture assumes.
I don't think that's a normal assumption.
It is a normal assumption
because people are individuals, and like, for example, now, like, you could be attracted to someone and they're not attracted back to you. That's life.
Well, we're not talking about the individual. We're talking about just a general sense that black people, black women particularly, feel that a lot of black men do not find them attractive, which is normal because it is.
And some of them don't. That is actually okay. It's actually all right. You wouldn't want someone that is not attracted to you to come and be with you. Like, why?
Let's move on.
Yeah,
go on. I want to move on though, just because there's a few things I want to say, because we went off topic, but slightly on topic. But yeah, I just wanted to disagree because I felt that the reason that Chamber was given was actually very simplistic. And unfortunately, I do appreciate that, but I think there is no other ethnicity, race, that there is a question that an Indian person will predominantly like an Indian. There's nothing wrong with Indians that like another Indian, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying there's a huge population, particularly of black men across different countries in Africa, in South America, in America. You happen to find them in Asia, that will tell you confidently with their chest they can never go with a black person. It doesn't make sense. It does not make any sense. So that's the reason why the whole idea of saying, but they're just attracted to what they're attracted to is redundant in itself, because there's something that makes you attracted to a particular. If you just said, I like who I like, and if it happens to be a light skin, etc., then that's fine. But people will tell you they will never go with a darker skinned woman or a black person, as Jockey said, of a certain shade. As in, shade determines somebody's beauty. And that's what we're saying. There's so much more than shade that determines somebody's beauty. So that's why I cannot at all ever agree with someone that says that, because you're feeding into the very mindset that rids a lot of black people, particularly black women, that face a lot of colorism, both in media and just in life. But yeah, what is colorism? Let's go into that. We're kind of talking about that, and I really want to talk about it in the continent of Africa, because we know the origins of it in the continent of America, and unfortunately the UK likes to take their narrative, and it's not, we can't take the narrative. So it's really important to understand that when the European settlers came into Africa, they wanted to, there's divide and conquer basically, and they used it by basically looking at their own features and seeing if there were any tribes that basically had any similarities to their features. So you can kind of see that in the next slide, in Congo and Rwanda and stuff like that. So they chose the Tutsis and basically made them superior to the Hutus because they had similar features. The European would measure the noses, the skin color, the temples and faces of the African ethnic groups to determine who was the superior ethnic group. So this is to show you that colorism is not only a psychological, social, it's also an economical phenomenon. That's the reason why anyone that can tell me it doesn't exist is a redundant argument. Likewise, racism. If we believe that a kingdom is based on authority, law, government, citizenship, and culture, and the way that God has changed our hearts is via his laws, is via his policies, is the same way that whether you're a believer or not, we've all been influenced by a mindset, a policy, the way certain group of people want us to think. Over centuries and centuries. So before I was born, being darker skinned was not desirable. And then I happened to be a darker skinned woman living in that society, being judged by that. So you can see pictures of the Tutsis and the Hutus. So that's like in Central Africa. There is a video that I'm going to play that basically gives you an explanation of colorism in Nigeria, and that could pertain to other African countries, but this is specific to Nigeria. So I said it's an amazing documentary. Watch it on Netflix. It's basically about colorism in Nigeria. And I was really, really intrigued because I think it's one of the first documentaries of its kind for Nigeria and even for Africa. In that sense, actually, I think it's quite amazing. There's so much that this presentation is going to be available for people to see, because there's much more in the presentation than we can really say. But I think just to talk about, as we know, the apartheid in South Africa. As we know, with South Africa, they have a lot of issues. They don't only have colorism. That's why I said they don't just have colorism, they're very xenophobic. So, in contrast to other African countries who are quite embracing of other African countries, many Nigerians I think it was last year, a lot of Nigerian celebrities refused to perform in South Africa because they kill a lot of Nigerians particularly, but they kill a lot of other African countries. So, but that's just to show you the slavery and the colonial impact on one country South Africa used. So we know that during the apartheid in South Africa, South Africa introduced the Population Registration Act number 30 of 1950 to provide social distinction between not only black and white individuals, but also colored or mixed race individuals. This reinforced each group's hierarchical stance in society as light-skinned individuals were runner-ups of white privilege. There's other information about that, as you can see here. The famous doll test of Kenneth and Mamie Clark, and I don't think anyone would be surprised to say the children preferred the white doll to the black child. So you can see the different children and the dolls and stuff like that. And we can go on and on. Look at the different shades of dark skin, melanin, that would have many young children being thinking of that. We might not be able to play this video, but I would definitely write this in Google and write flexing her complexion. She's a beautiful dark-skinned child who just felt inadequate and felt that she was not beautiful enough. I think her sister's actually fairer skinned. Cut long story short, her parents put her into this like class where you strut your stuff and just gives girls confidence. And I think her sister said, "Oh, look at my sister, she's flexing in her complexion." And that became a hashtag. I think she went on Ellen and all of this different stuff. But that's just to show you what a beautiful girl who actually thought she was ugly and thought she was not good enough because society tells her that being dark skinned is not good enough. And that's, I guess, the essence. And I don't know if Mameyaa, you have other thoughts to say that we're trying to talk about colorism, is that it really impacts particularly young girls. I'm definitely not denying black men do have issues about that, because I've actually counseled black men that have issues about colorism. But I really think it's important that some of us are raising not only black men, but are raising black daughters and even dark-skinned black daughters, that it really is important for us to understand the effects of colorism, because as Joke said, we're bringing children into this world that because of their melanin of their skin will be seen less than. Don't know, Mams, if you want to say any more before we go into what.
No, I agree with everything you've just said, and what I would add is just basically having the language around colorism, and it does take time for you to go and do your research and for you to sit and think about some of the things that are being said, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. We're all in the community agreeing that there is colorism, but some people think that it doesn't affect them, which I just find perplexing, to be honest, because I think it does affect you if you're in the community. But that's just my opinion. So, yeah.
I think the last thing to talk about, but what the Bible says, and I think it's quite simple. I think there's nothing different to what's been spoken of in the further presentations. That that our Lord and Savior, our judge does not judge us based on our race or ethnicity, let alone the level of melanin in our skin. I think they say that the Queen Sheba was If she was from Ethiopia, she was a dark-skinned woman. But you know, the law does not judge us. And I think to add to this, the reason why you see dark-skin magic, black melanin popping, is what happens when an oppressed group or a group of people feel less than, try to push back. So the whole argument about entitlement is not that we're saying black men should only like black women. Some people believe that, some people don't. Is the fact that we're trying to question old age psychological and a lot of it is invisible. A lot of these stuff are invisible. That's the reason why there'll be people that will tell you, I just like what I like. And you think, so you're telling me that nothing has influenced your belief, your understanding, but you will say, oh, don't represent me as a hoodlum. So that means if you understand that representation is important and that you do not want to be seen a certain way because it will make other races judge you by that, isn't it the same when you talk about darker skinned black women or dark skin in general? Representation is important. So the reason why black women, particularly darker skinned black women, we say that is because when nowadays we say black women, the people that are in media don't represent us in complexion. They are black. No one's denying Rihanna or Beyonce or other people's blackness, but we are saying there's a lack of representation because they happen to all be of a certain shade and a certain ambiguousness, because they can be seen as Native American or Latin America or black, whereas an unambiguous black woman like this beautiful young girl here is no longer as represented as she was, as you saw in the 90s with Mameyaa and Parker's and certain programs that we grew up watching. A lot of the programs that young kids are watching on TV, if you're thinking about black programs, the lead person isn't someone that represents my shade or Mameyaa shade. And it is important, even though but they're black. So I think, as Mameyaa says, we know what the Lord says, that we are all one in Christ, and we believe that. But I think if nothing has taught us is that irrespective of the fact that we are, one kingdom, and we're not of this world, we cannot deny the impact of representation and deny the impact that media and societal and psychological influences have, particularly when you're growing up, being told that you're blick or you're like a burnt toast. These things really impact your self-esteem. Here, the impact of bleaching on these women.
Sorry, Esther, could I just come in with a thought? It's just the thought that I was having, and it's on the premise that has blackness actually made us colorless? And the reason why I asked that question is because we know that as a people, if we look across, and I'm specifically focusing on the African continent, as a people, we're very, very colorful. If you go across all of the different countries, you will see that we are very colorful in everything, our attire, our food, everything is really vibrant and colorful. And I wonder that part of the stripping away of that sort of colorful heritage has been because due to colonialism, we've been reduced to being black, whereas actually our heritage is completely the opposite. Now, I'm going beyond skin here, obviously. But what do you think about that? Do you think that sort of micro spectrum view of all of us being black has actually contributed to through the loss of heritage to us being that reflected, colorful people that we are?
I would yes and no, because I've always said that before blackness, I'm Nigerian, but that's because I was brought up like that. And one of my good friends who's Jamaican says, "Oh no, but come on, we're all black." I said, I didn't say I'm not black. I just said if somebody asked me what I am first, I had to choose, I would say Nigerian, because I was brought up as a Nigerian, particularly an Igbo woman. So even before Nigeria, I'm Igbo. So I agree in that sense. As my ethnicity is an Igbo woman, and that is both parents are Igbo. I was raised, unfortunately can't speak the language, but I was raised, accept the language, as an Igbo woman. That's what I am first, followed by black. However, irrespective of that, if you put me, Mameyaa, who else is dark skin hair? Me, Mameyaa, as in similar complexions, then obviously you've got Joke, you've got Naz, you've got Liz. Before we all speak and say where we're ethnicity form, we're going to be seen as black women, and we're also going to be determined as darker skinned women, and some of our features are closer to the Africanoid features and not. So that's the reason why I would agree and disagree. And that's why I do get the arguments when black people say, but we're just black, is because irrespective that we come from different ethnicities, before I hear you speak, before you tell me, oh, where are you from, Fred? Where are you from, Mameyaa? I'm just going to see you as a black person. Now, obviously, I can tell, okay, I think you're Ghanaian, you're that. But overall, I'm seen as a dark-skinned black woman. So even though my ethnicity, and I am proud of that, being a Nigerian woman, in the country of my origin, there's colorism. So even if we the beautiful stuff, there is colorism based on the colonialism. Any country touched by colonialism has colorism, but any country not touched by colonialism has colorism. So, you know, why this another conversation, because I don't know why some countries that have never been touched by colonialism have colorism. So there's something about black and lighter skin that is just I think from sin has evolved into that. You know, Somalia touched by Arabs, they're colorist. If you got a mixture of in you, you're seen as better.
You know, can I just come in, because the reason they're really good points you've raised, and I absolutely agree with you. I've always wondered the sort of the black consciousness, and I say consciousness, I know that's varied, there's a spectrum there, but black consciousness, I always felt in some way, shape or form actually disempowered us, because it doesn't reflect the diversity. And that's what I felt in the past, especially in the early 80s and 90s, which is why I didn't really jump on board the bandwagon. But I think that's partly because I'd actually grown up partly in Nigeria. So I was amongst people that were talking about black consciousness, but never lived in the country and weren't actually tied to their roots, maybe because they were third or fourth generation. But there's sometimes a feeling that blackness actually sometimes removes or is disconnected from the heritage, and so removes the vibrancy of that heritage, and it ends up becoming purely just about color. And I found this in the O.J. Simpson documentaries, which is very interesting, how color, it just became about color, but actually there was far much more going on in classism, for example, and the heritage of O.J. Simpson himself. That's just that's a new point.
You're right, because that relates to racism, isn't it? That's the argument about racism, and that races don't actually exist, and there is nothing of racism, although we do see it. So I do agree. That's why I agree. But I think,
can I just quickly say add something in terms of what you said, Esther, because I remembered when there was this rap artist, I don't know, he's quite well known, and Akala was interviewing him, and funny enough, he wrote a song on colorism because his daughter had come to him. I think she was really young as well. I think she was only like 6 or 7.
Elana Getz. I think it was Getz. I have a retro.
Yeah, and as a result, he felt so obviously, but heartbroken by the way she felt about herself, that made him now say, okay, I'm going to actually create a song. And that's what he did, to address that and to make her realize that actually you're beautiful. And I don't think he realized the impact it had on a female until she came so young, asking him certain things and saying certain things.
But there was 2 points I wanted to make. One of them was the fact that with colorism, you find a lot of men deny that it is something that actually exists. And the interesting thing, and a lot of light-skinned women deny that it actually exists. Some, not all actually. There's light-skinned women that actually will stand up and say colorism exists. It's interesting because light-skinned men also receive colorism, and it's against them. They're seen as more feminine, or they're seen as not as masculine, etc. So they have a voice, but it's never really been heard. And then we have the issue of the same light-skinned women that are put with what Chen was talking about, competition. So the same light-skinned women that have an advantage over dark-skinned women and are chosen more are procreating or pre-creating with dark-skinned men who are having dark-skinned daughters. And because they don't realize that colorism exists, they're not ready when their daughters come to them. But I want to just, one of the last things I want to say is black women are very resilient in the sense where we're actually trailblazers when it comes to, on social media, particularly when it comes to a lot of culture. And if we would realize the power that we actually have Because when we say that something is acceptable, it becomes acceptable. This is the same hair movement. We didn't wait for men to tell us that natural hair was beautiful. We didn't wait for Europeans or other races to tell us natural hair was beautiful. We did it. We even changed the way the buy-in habits were for people that make money off our pound. So one thing I'll say is we should continue to put out representations of ourselves. That's one of the things, that is one of the reasons why the book that I'm producing, I put different shades. Someone was saying, oh, make it, do one character because so it's not confusing. I said, no, I want a different shade of characters so each girl can look at a girl who's got their complexion and have someone that they can relate to. I think Black women should continue to create your own narrative, continue to create your own, you know, put out your own positive representations of yourself, and the men that are supporting us, because there are men out there that are supporting us doing that. But what else can we do when there's a lot of people out there that, just like with racism, I'm not pro Black Lives Matter, but I know racism exists. It's seeped into, you know, like a lot of the laws and the institutions within society, and it's like colorism is too, but no one wants to hear because it means they need to change. Just like being a right-handed person, and then all of a sudden the world starts producing scissors for left-handed people, and then we get upset because we're like, hold on, but we've lived in a right-handed world for so long, so we haven't had to make changes in our lives, not realizing that these left-handed people are having to use mouses made for right-handed people, scissors made for right-handed people, you know, kind of thing. So we don't realize the privileges that we have.
On that note, we can go to communion, but we want to say thank you so much, everyone, for participating. There is so much more conversations about colorism we haven't overly touched on, but hopefully you've got in the essence and it's just incited the conversation. The kingdom of God is amazing. God has called us as one people. So we're one blood under Christ. So we can be thankful that God does not judge us on the level or the amount of pigmentation in our skin. We give him all the glory and we give him all the praise. Thank you, Mameyaa. It's been a pleasure, and thank you all.